This prelude is very similar to the G sharp minor one. The theme is this, what I call the polypulse, breaking down a beat into either 3 and 2 and putting them together. However, here, unlike in the G sharp minor prelude, the polypulse is much more readily available. There, it was just buried in cryptic harmony and very fast movement, and I think the loopiest part is that there it was basically in a single voice. We quickly switched between 2 and 3. 1 and 2 triplet, 1 and 2 triplet. Here we have separate voices. It's much more clear that one voice is in 3 and one voice is in 2, and they don't quickly switch between the 2 and the 3 as often. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 triplet, 2 triplet, 3 triplet, 4 triplet. Just because it's much more readily available does not mean that it's an easier piece to play or easier to pull off the 3 against 2 polypulse. Polyrhythm. It's still a polypulse. We require here a very, I think the hardest thing is a very clean arpeggio technique, a 5-finger arpeggio technique, very light thumb. You also need very good, clean trills. And again, feeling this pulse, this 3 against 2, making both of the voices separate and alive by themselves, but also blending together, is difficult. It's a pretty difficult thing to do. So in this episode, besides talking a little bit about trill technique, about arpeggio technique, let's talk about how to feel this 3 against 2 polypulse in the context of this piece, and most importantly, how to transition between moments of 3 and moments of 2 in separate voices and in the same voice. I think that's one of the tricks to this prelude. One of the most important things to make it just go off without a hitch is to have very smooth transitions between the different pulses. So let's dig into it. First thing first is finding this balance between the 2 and the 3. Right off the bat, we have 2 and 3. And I find it very difficult to find a clear balance. If I just play one of the voices by itself, it doesn't always jive with the speed of the other voice. So the triplet voice feels pretty fast to me. But that would require an arpeggio speed that I just do not have yet. So what is this? Conversely, these arpeggios in 2, they feel good even pretty slowly. At that speed, these triplets might be a bit slow. So you do need to make some concession in speed. One or the other might not be really where it wants to be on its own. But again, I want to emphasize something in Bach and really in all of music. Even though you do have separate voices and each one should breathe and have a life of its own, they still need to be combined at some point. Having them only separate, as if you were recording the voices separately, will never sound as cohesive as when you play them together. So even though there is a concession, maybe this arpeggio in 2 would be a little faster than you'd want, or this these still kind of arpeggios in 3 would be a little bit slower. You need to really work on the different parts of the piece to see what feels good together. Try different tempos, hands apart, and voices together, to land on something that sounds good and cohesive. And it's really a matter of tempo. Articulation is pretty important as well, but I think tempo will get you most of the way there. But yeah, articulation, very important. We'll talk about that a bit more in the arpeggios, but you can articulate in so many ways, from like pure legato to mixtures of portato legato, and the triplets as well. That's really the main way that I feel this bum ba 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 bum. But again, I think tempo is the most important thing to really lock into for this balance. The arpeggios. Wow, this piece is so difficult technically. it's not just that you have arpeggios. I mean, arpeggios are not that difficult. It's a building block. But you have these arpeggios that are pretty wide. So they're not quite octave arpeggios, but they're still pretty wide. Not just that, you need to have a very good technique with the four. A lot of these Bach pieces that we're finishing up with, this is really the technical difficulty of them. You need to use all 5 fingers equally well. Like in the D major one, you need to have, look at that, all 5 fingers in perfect harmony. Here as well, I mean in this section, we've got an arpeggio and we're using all 5 fingers. And you'll notice how the 4th finger is always the odd one out and the most difficult one. There's not too much that I can say to like really make this click and work for you. I do think in your daily arpeggio practicing, again, just like when we started in the C major episode, think of the aristocrats, okay? You must sing your scales and your arpeggios. If you do that daily, you will find your progress is encouraging. So in your daily arpeggio practice, add in these 5-finger arpeggios. You can use the examples in this piece as a building block. As I've said before, an excellent thing you should do in any piece that you're playing, focus on the things that are a little technically difficult and extract from them your own studies. So in this case, this motion, go through it in all the keys. Ensure that you have equal strength in all the fingers. And even though you're playing with 4 and 5, and they're very weak, and you're playing very fast, make sure that you're sinking to the bottom of the key bed and you're really extracting all of the sound that you can out of it. Do that with both hands. The left hand is much weaker, obviously. Maybe not obviously. So in a minor key, the other important thing with these arpeggios, besides just practicing them in your daily scales and arpeggios practice, is to have a very light thumb. So right at the beginning, this do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do. Notice how we're going down to the thumb, we're going back up, and then starting a second motion with the thumb. Just be very aware of the fact that your thumb has a tendency to really dig into a note too much. And work on this light movement of the thumb. This is a pretty good exercise to do. Here as well. You see, I still have a pretty loose left thumb. Oof. This is another one of the things where there's not much of a tip. Just be aware of the fact that your thumb is going to move around quite a lot through these arpeggios, and you just need to be aware of it and try to compensate for any over eagerness that the thumb might have. The last thing I want to mention just briefly, you noticed, especially in the left hand, but with both hands, there's a rocking motion that's going to help quite a lot, because for each of these arpeggios, you kind of have two different positions, a position up here and a position down here. It's pretty hard unless you have a very wide hand to keep your hand super steady, super still, and play all of these notes. So there is a slight rocking motion of the hand. It's a little hard to explain, and I think it's going to be very particular to every individual player, so I can't give you too much of a tip about it. Just be aware that you might need to use some movements of the hands to get yourself from here to here, from here to here, from here to here. And as usual, the best way to do that is through a rocking motion with the wrist. Now for trills, unfortunately, I just really do not have a good thing to say. I was really hoping that I would have my trill technique pretty much down by this point, but they're just so hard. I don't have any tip other than continue to play trills very strictly and and slowly ramp up the speed, okay, strictly, and in sync. The synchronization is, I think, really the key to make sure that you're not just playing them loosey-goosey. So always with both hands, slowly ramping up the tempo with different fingerings, and use pieces to give you something a little more interesting to do than just this. So in this case, for example, let's use the left hand, because this trill, for example, is just absolutely brutal. So play your arpeggio with the right hand. You can work on some arpeggio technique while doing the left hand trill. Again, in perfect sync. And hopefully that will get you close to being able to just play them quite fast. Again, I'm sorry, I was hoping that I would have something a bit more intelligent to say, but I'm still really working on my trill technique. The last thing I want to talk about is these transitions between the pulses. Again, the most important thing to this piece is feeling the 3 and the 2 polypulse. So you need to just extract out of the piece, find out the places where there is a transition from one pulse to another, and focus on that to make sure it's very smooth. So let me give you the 3 main examples. The 3 main examples. So, right here. Okay. So we've got the left hand voice plays in 3. Hone in on that. That sounded pretty good. I find that it helps to, if you're playing staccato, to play the last note of the triplet, the 3 pulse, legato, to tie it to the start of the arpeggio, which is in 2. That's just me personally. You obviously don't have to do that necessarily, but I find that it helps to smoothly enter from the 3 to the 2. There's also exiting from 2 to 3, from these arpeggios to the 2. Again, in the same section after the left hand does. Really hone those in. Find all the places in both hands where you're switching from 3 to 2 or from 2 to 3, and practice just that one part so that you have a very smooth transition. Equally important are these trills. When you're going from the arpeggio to the trill, you need to have a very light double note, because you're going from here in the trill, the arpeggio, and your trill starts with this, at least in my edition, and I think this is in the manuscript pretty clear. You have this entrance to the trill. So you have this double note, for example, in this case, the D. So practice this transition to make sure that you have a light ending note of the arpeggio and a light ending starting note of the trill. Here we don't have a double note, but again, the same idea. We're switching from the arpeggios to the trill. Make sure you're entering that trill very cleanly. And finally, the trill, the end of the trill to the start of the arpeggio. That's also a pretty tricky thing, and maybe pretty important. Very often, the trill, like here we're trilling on a C sharp, and the start of the arpeggio is on a D, because we're going from a major chord to D minor. Now, I don't have my trills that good that I can constantly trill very well and then start on the D note, but I think it is something worth trying. So trill on this note, and make sure you're feeling from the C sharp into the D. That's another thing that's going to help the transitions be a lot smoother. So that's it for this piece. Very beautiful. I love it a lot. I love the feel of this. At any speed, it's just so cool to feel this polypulse, this 3 against 2. A little unfortunate that you need to have such good trill technique and just such fast arpeggio technique and light arpeggios. But with practice, you can get there, and it sounds beautiful even very slowly. So definitely don't let the difficulty of this piece keep you from playing it. It's a wonderful pedagogical exercise, like pretty much all of Bach, and especially the preludes. Hope you enjoyed the episode. Let's play the piece.